So before making this review, I was reading the synopsis for this movie on Wikipedia and I was getting emotional. This movie has some sort of power over me. I've been waiting so long to talk about this. Inside Out is directed by Pete Docter, written by him, Meg LeFauve, and Josh Cooley, and features the voices of Amy Poehler, Phyllis Smith, Richard Kind, and Caitlin Diaz. And Inside Out is about this 11-year-old girl named Riley, voiced by Caitlin Diaz, who is moving from her home in Minnesota to San Francisco, and it's a pretty rough move for her. She can't really adjust that well. She left behind all her friends, and we begin to see this emotional turmoil and development inside her head, represented by these 5 emotions. Now, it would be very easy for me just to say that I liked Inside Out because it's a Pixar movie, because I found it funny or emotionally stirring, but I really want to underline the fact that not only do I think that this is a great animated movie, not only do I think that this is one of the best movies of the year, but I honestly think that it is one of the best movies I have ever seen. I think Inside Out is an absolute masterpiece, and not just because it's a Pixar movie or an animated movie, but simply because it has some of the best writing, voice acting, and directing that I've seen in a very long time. First of all, the animation in this movie is fantastic because it works on 2 levels. Number 1, everything in Riley's mind is super colorful and diverse, but still retains a sense of belonging in an 11-year-old's head. And it's really impressive that they were able to take all these supposedly unrelated things and make them all look like they're still coming from one place. It must have been a field day for Pixar to really animate all this stuff in her head, because it looks like so much fun, especially when certain characters end up in abstract thought or dream productions or this subconscious prison. And number 2, when you're in the real world with Riley and her family and when they're doing realistic things, the movie takes on this near photorealistic quality to it, with the lighting, with the sets and whatnot. Even in the way the camera moves and focuses feels like, it's a live action thing. The character designs, especially for the emotions, are very clever. Like, if you've been reading up on Inside Out since it came out, you'll know that the 5 emotions here are based on the shapes of things that inspire those emotions. But my favorite moments, visually speaking, in this movie are these really simple moments that are just so ethereal and beautiful that I was tearing up even like at the beginning of the movie when Joy sees Riley as a baby. That moment just seemed to capture something so abstract, but Pixar put it in the visuals and I felt emotional because of it. Sound is also always great in Pixar movies, and they've also produced some of the best movie soundtracks ever. And Michael Giacchino alone, he's done music for The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and Up, and his score here for Inside Out is just perfect, I think. It starts out very delicate and precious, then gets really energetic and playful, and finally starts getting more grand and melancholy, and this evolution in music keeps on reflecting Riley's development as she grows up. And if you've watched the movie, go online, look for the song Rainbow Flyer, and I dare you not to get emotional. It's just such a well-crafted song. Also, the Triple Dent Gum song really will get stuck in your head. Now, this film was edited by Kevin Nolting, and he does one heck of a job. It's really, really fantastic editing, because you have to understand just how difficult it is to synchronize what's happening in the real world with what's happening in Riley's head, while keeping the pace so steady all throughout the movie. This isn't like a super fast-paced comedy or whatever. It's really one of Pixar's more contemplative movies, but things are always moving, things are always happening, you're always being introduced to a new concept in terms of psychology. But what I like is that there are key moments that happen in the movie that rely on this high concept, on psychology and whatnot, but they never over-explain these moments. Like, there are certain times when they really just leave it up to the viewer, and I think even younger audiences will be able to piece it together in their minds as well. And again, it's a much more satisfying experience that way. And I got this one point from Philbert D, who writes for Click the City, but he said, and I agree with him, that at first glance, it seems like Riley's emotions are controlling her actions in the real world. And he kind of argues that it's kind of the other way around. It's really what Riley goes through that causes the emotions to react. And I would take that a step further by saying that neither of these things affect the other one, because they're happening simultaneously at the same time. They are completely parallel, and I think that is super impressive. You can kind of see this in the scenes where it's set in the real world, Riley's doing real world stuff, but you can hear the voices of the emotions all kind of talking at the same time, deciding what to do. And even if you take out the voices of the emotions, or if you just focus on them without, showing Riley, it works. It's parallel. Now, I feel like the trickiest part to making this movie was with the writing, and the trickiest part must have been to make these characters that represent emotions not be flat. They are by nature one-note characters because they have to represent their emotions, but they aren't flat because of how they're written and how they respond to certain situations, with the exception, of course, of joy and sadness. We spend the most time with them as they get lost in long-term memory, and they have a very complex relationship that actually allows us to relate to them. We are able to suddenly relate with these emotions. And let's talk about Bing Bong for a while. Oh my god, like, I will not spoil anything about Bing Bong in case you have not seen this movie. He doesn't have as much screen time as the other characters, but he's Riley's imaginary friend that joy and sadness meet. And he represents another aspect of Riley that, for me, was just so brutally honest that you will probably cry because of Bing Bong. Now, I think it would be unfair to say that Riley is just a vessel or a plot device for the emotions, because she is the story. Like, all these characters coming together, it's really just to tell the story of this little girl growing up. It is a coming-of-age story deep down, and we can all relate to it. Now, personally, I was nervous about this movie because I had no idea how they were going to pull it off. I couldn't see how they could fit a plot into this high concept, but they did it, man. They really did it, and I can attest to that because this is honestly the first movie to have ever made me cry. And I'm not saying that they made me cry, thus I like this movie. I'm saying that this movie is so good that it was able to make me cry. And it didn't make me cry because of huge devastating events, though there was nothing wrong with like the furnace scene from Toy Story 3 or the married life montage from Up, but because of simple gestures and words that hit home so hard for me. This was obviously amplified by the fact that everyone in my theater was crying at the same time, but it really got to me on a really personal level. But not to say that this movie is more of a drama or anything. This movie still has a lot of that classic Pixar humor that all generations can connect to. Another thing that Pixar always does well is voice acting, and the cast here is fantastic. They're all so perfectly cast, from Diane Lane and Kyle MacLachlan as Riley's parents, who have their own emotional complexities, to Bill Hader as Fear, Louis Black as Anger, Mindy Kaling as Disgust. This might be more of a credit to the casting department, but Caitlin Diaz, who voices Riley, really becomes a character who's equal parts like masculine and feminine, so we can all kind of relate to her. Richard Kind, who's kind of a semi-regular for Pixar, is the perfect balance of whimsy and longing here as Bing Bong. He does such a good job. And Phyllis Smith is also perfectly cast as Sadness, and she does this really odd but interesting mix of being a downer, because she really is kind of a downer, but in a comforting way. But for me, Amy Poehler really stole the show. Like, I did not even know it was Amy Poehler until after the movie, and she was just full of so much energy, but at the same time, she was able to kind of bring the house down as well with a lot of really emotional scenes. And I know that's kind of weird saying that these emotions have their own emotions, but she was really able to sell it. Now, I've said this time and time again, but Pixar is, in my opinion, the best movie studio working today. I mean, not only have they made easily a handful of the best animated films ever made, but they have made a few of the best movies ever made, period. And this is not just because they make family-friendly entertainment, it's because they have world-class animators and writers and directors like Pete Docter. I mean, being able to successfully engage with one target audience is hard enough, but to really capture all generations, that's like a godlike achievement. The way Pete Docter balances tone and emotion so much while dealing with characters that are emotions is so impressive, and the way he condenses psychology into this universally accessible thing is so impressive to me, because a lot of people are like, oh, he should have put this concept in there, but I think that would have derailed the story. In my opinion, the way he did it in Inside Out is the perfect way to do it. Inside Out to me is quite simply a masterpiece. It is easily one of my top 3 Pixar movies of all time. And I think it's an important film because of this movie, a lot of conversations have been started on proper parenting, on mental health, and the message that Pixar sends here is, for me, the ballsiest message they've ever had, that it's okay to feel these negative emotions, that you need emotional balance in your life, and it's not okay to force yourself to be happy all the time. So those are my thoughts on Inside Out. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.